I struggle with Easter. I always have, at least since I became a pastor. I don't tell anyone at my seminary. And it's not the bonnets or the rabbit ears or the chocolate eggs or even the plastic ones. I am pro-bonnet. I am pro-patent leather. I am pro-seersucker. I lived in Dallas. I saw it at its finest. And despite prices this year, I am pro-egg. Real egg, plastic egg, chocolate egg. You can do all kinds of things like with them. They can be hunted, they can be rolled, they can be deviled, which I particularly enjoy on Easter. All the eggs, just fine with the eggs. And if you are trying to save a buck or two this year, and you have decided to dye potatoes or marshmallows or paint rocks, I affirm this for you. I am also pro-tulip and pro-daffodil. I am fine with Easter lilies, but to be completely honest, I find them a bit aggressive and intense, like Red Bull or trumpet players or Texas fans. Yeah. I am pro-bunnies, pro-chicks, pro-ducks and ducklings, and I'm even just all in here for the sweet infusion of the pre-Christian Anglo-Saxon goddess Oestra, from whom we have this name, in this whole day, because there is always room for a little more feminine divine. Oh, thank you. But I still struggle with Easter. And it's not the symbols or the springtime or the tradition, it is the theology. The theology that Easter invites in this modern day brings me and us face to face with both beauty and staggering terror, and the worst of Christian history and theology laid bare in front of us. We are a resurrection people, an Easter people, but mostly we are obsessed with Good Friday. Folks who followed Jesus didn't fixate on the violence of Good Friday. They didn't write down every gory detail. They knew all about crucifixion already. The people who followed him and loved him and learned from him and walked with him, they celebrated life. The sharing of meals, laughter and tears, the harsh realities of confronting the religious and political establishment. And when they watched their beloved friend that had turned into family die at the hands of the Roman Empire, they just must have felt utter despair. How could this happen to such a good person? Killed without due process, without the slightest bit of mercy, a sham trial, an offering to the empire. And what could they have done anyway? Whether they disappeared or stayed right by the cross, what could they have done, honestly? They were in a state of grief and fear and probably utter hopelessness, which is the point of these crucifixions. The point is to keep folks who feel small, small and afraid. But it doesn't work. Mary goes to the tomb having witnessed death, and she comes back speaking about resurrection and Easter and new life. Everyone there experienced trauma and pain and the utmost of grief, and yet they fixate on life. They lean into it. They long for it. They share these stories over and over and over. That's why it's called the good news. They fixate on life, and we struggle. We, in this modern form of Christianity, for the most part, love suffering. We fixate on the violence and the gruesome death. Christianity has a history of violence because of this. There are plenty of churches around here who will have had Holy Week services that are gruesome and filled with ugly and horrific details, stories where men leave the table and Jesus is all alone. You can find plenty of bloody statues and paintings of faces consumed with pain. There are even famous reenactments of Jesus' crucifixion throughout European history, and our church, especially in medieval monasticism, has this strain of self-harm because suffering takes on this sort of sanctified process. And all of this happened before Mel Gibson. Thank you. I'll be here all day. No, just kidding. We love suffering and violence so much that we have objectified it, I think. We've commodified it, we've sensationalized it, we've marketed it. We've packaged the pain of the cross up in something pretty and bedazzled sometimes, golden and lovely. We have stripped it of its complexity and its meaning. We have turned it into performance, and it is gross. We love watching Good Friday and suffering, but we struggle to bear witness to it, to really let it matter. This year, Donald Trump sent you and I an Easter message. I thought about just reading it, but no, just kidding. I'll give you some, though. Donald Trump wrote you and I a note about Holy Week and Easter, the man who is surrounded by folks wearing beautiful gold crosses who defend his blatant disregard for due process, for basic decency, for those he was willing to dehumanize and send away into notorious prison camps in El Salvador, like it was a necessary practice to make us all safe. The man who feels entitled to taking over Palestine so that he can make a beautiful resort. The one who eagerly slashes public health and medical research and support for the most vulnerable folks among us here in this country and around the world with U.S. aid. The deal maker who belittles, dehumanizes, and traffics in hate, who sows division wherever he goes. The one who's sure DEI isn't with Jesus, and the one who even demanded, despite rising prices, that the White House lawn use 30,000 real eggs for their family event. He wrote us a Christian Easter message. He's not the first president to write such a message. There are 6. Bill Clinton wrote in 1996, "In this age of great challenge and even greater possibility, Easter's timeless message strengthens us for the tasks before us. As we celebrate in churches and cathedrals, at sunrise services, and in family gatherings, we remember that our lives have greater purpose and value. We recognize that in the life and words of Jesus, we are called to works of caring and compassion." As I read all the presidential Holy Week and Easter messages, it turns out George W. Bush was my favorite. I would not have said that when I was in seminary. Boy, those were the days. He writes, "This Easter season, join me in praying for peace, wisdom, and resolve. During this holy time, may Christ's example of love and sacrifice compel us towards justice and compassion, and renew us with an assurance of hope and joy." Trump never uses the word compassion once. There's no joy. There's no talk of purpose. In several events this Holy Week, he touted his record on ending all the things that are woke, on defending Christianity. And then he sends out this message. which I think is probably not his and probably not even one of his staff members. Like, I feel like they very much used AI to try and help them prove, that they understood something about the day, because at some point he says the Paschal Triduum, which I had to look that back up. Because you know who never talks about the Paschal Triduum? Me. And I do this a lot. It's like a fancy word for those 3 days between Lent and Easter season. Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday. Now you know. You can quiz Donald Trump anytime you see him and see if he remembers. He talks a lot about Jesus' suffering, way more than any of the other presidents. And so I offer you this piece from him. During this sacred week, we acknowledge the glory of Easter Sunday and that it cannot come without the sacrifice Jesus Christ made on the cross. In his final hours on earth, Christ willingly endured excruciating pain, torture, and execution on the cross out of deep and abiding love for all his creation. Through his suffering, we have redemption. Through his death, we are forgiven of sins. This Holy Week, my administration renews its promise to defend the Christian faith in our schools, military, workplaces, hospitals, and halls of government. We will never waver in safeguarding the rights to religious liberty, upholding the dignity of life, and protecting God in the public square. Trump is not the first leader to talk about Christ's suffering while inflicting so much in the world. 300 years after Jesus' death, Emperor Constantine fights a war to become the emperor and wins. He fights it in Jesus' name. You know, what would Jesus do? That's what he thought. And he makes it legal to be Christian, and he even joins up. 418 years after Jesus' death, St. Augustine or Augustine, you choose, I don't have feelings about it, writes a formal doctrine of original sin. It's a theological narrative that starts to center something new in Christianity. These early church fathers who were working through their own struggles with their being and their bodies and their wants and not finding a way through talk about how humans must be filled with original sin. And in talking about this, you start to need even more of a sacrifice to be at one with God. Atonement becomes this conversation around Jesus' suffering and death, that something like this has to happen. 100 years after this doctrine emerges, this fringe idea gets a conversation at the church council that gathers all the bishops and leaders from the Christian community writ large. They will discuss this doctrine of original sin, and at the same time, they will ban women's ordination and leadership. 810 years after Jesus dies, Charlemagne will be crowned Holy Roman Emperor by the Pope. His cathedral in Aachen, Germany, has a beautiful mosaic of Jesus enthroned. And guess what? His chair sits right under it, and they are like twinsies. Charlemagne, like the other Germanic kings and Celtic kings, were being sold this notion and buying it, that Christianity, this new faith, would help them cement their leadership, would help them manage folks, would help them keep folks controllable. And any of the priests who disagreed or said something otherwise were silenced. The theology that highlights suffering as imperative, as essential to our salvation, becomes even more powerful as Charlemagne takes the whole continent through violence and kills folks who refuse to be baptized with him. This theology comes to sort of a pinnacle, if you might say. 1,095 years after Jesus' death, Pope Urban II looks out along Europe and says, ugh, everybody's fighting with each other. Could you all please stop fighting each other? It's a real mess for me being related to all of you that you would fight each other. And so he comes up with a great idea, and these are his words of announcement. Let those who are accustomed to wantonly wage private war march against the infidels. Let those who have long been robbers now be soldiers for Christ. Let those who have been hirelings for a few pieces of silver attain their eternal reward. Let nothing delay those who are willing to go. They amass a gathering of Europeans, and they go with zeal all the way to the Holy Land. Along the way, they kill and ravage and execute 1/3 of the Jewish population living in European cities at that time. They have this theology not of homicide but of malicide, that it is sacred for them to kill evil. Malicide. They arrive at Jerusalem just in time for Holy Week, and they attack the city on Good Friday. They write endlessly about their bloody work of the city. It is gruesome and grotesque, and I don't know if it's because they felt no shame or no guilt or no sense that it was wrong, probably, or also because when things are so wrong and you keep saying them over and over and over and repeating them over and over and over and sanctifying them and praising them in sermons from the Pope, they become okay. Now here we are, some 2,000 years later, and this nation that is supposed to be named as a Christian nation by some, they choose guns over schools and safety. They want to mandate the 10 Commandments like it will really matter instead of paying for school lunch. They are robbing our campuses of diversity, equity, and inclusion programming. They are robbing us of the research that has been done and the ways that we have maintained public health. And white Christian nationalism is an epidemic around us, and this Easter feels harder than ever. And so what do we do? We look to the stories that we have, and I believe that Easter is at least very much in part about practice. Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb in her grief and in her longing just to be close, and she sees life. She is in the midst of death. She is surrounded by sadness, and she claims life. She senses Jesus' presence. She senses this hope to go on. The disciples who are walking on the road to Emmaus, they are there in their grief and their longing, this hazy space of uncertainty. And then they sense Christ's love in the breaking of the bread. They do what he taught them to do by inviting the stranger in for food, and suddenly they remember. See, Mary Magdalene could sense Easter, I think, because she had walked with Jesus month in and month out, year after year. And they had seen crucifixion. They had seen plenty of pain and violence and inhumanity. But Jesus taught them moment by moment to see something more, to see new life, to see resurrection. She had seen a bent-over woman stand upright. She had seen a woman who was hemorrhaging blood and excluded from community healed and brought back in. A man who was besought with a legion of demons, sitting clothed and in his right mind. She saw thousands of people sharing on the hillside. Jesus taught them over and over and over. She worked through her own demons, and while we may not use that language, we can certainly imagine it as working through your stuff, through your ego, through all of the things that hold an unhealthy space within you. Mary Magdalene practiced looking for resurrection, being a part of resurrection, and so she invites us today. It may be why we gather each week, especially now. To be connected despite every reason to fear. To know one another's names, to connect and reconnect, to know who we can call when we need help. To be present and sensitive to the weight of the world. And so we must practice seeing resurrection, a new life. Maybe we can see it in some of those park rangers who speak up, in the filibusters and the whistleblowers. We can see it in folks who provide legal aid and legal support despite all of the risks. We can see it in the emergency contraceptives that are provided here and everywhere. We can see it in teachers and school administrators who turn ICE away. We can see it in our little blue dot that survived. We can see it in the Montana legislature when they rejected the transgender bathroom bill. And we can see it in New Mexico that despite everything in our economy going wrong, they have decided for universal child care. All we can do is try. All we can do is keep together. That is our resurrection faith that we practice week in and week out. Because Jesus didn't die for sins. He died because of human sinfulness and brokenness. And bearing witness means working for a world where no more crucifixions happen, where we say no with every breath and every moment and every opportunity we can. May we have the courage. May it be so. Amen.